Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Quill and Curtain Podcast, the podcast for playwrights, by playwrights. This is Darren Friedman, and today we have a special guest, Jonathan Cook, the creator of Gather by the Ghostlight podcast, and he is heavily involved in the fine arts, not only as an actor, but writer and filmmaker. Many of his short plays have been produced in theaters around the world, and his full-length play Lobster Man is slated for its world premiere in January 2025. Aside from playwriting, he has also written and directed several short films that have been presented in regional film festivals as well as distributed internationally on Shorts TV. He is also the host and producer of the radio theater podcast Gather by the Ghostlight, which was launched in 2020. And it's a radio theater podcast that produces cinematic sounding audio plays with professional voice actors and immersed sound effects and music. Hi, Jonathan. How are you doing?
Hey, Darren. Doing pretty good. How about you?
I've been such a fan of yours for a while now. I watch you. It sounds so creepy, but I see kind of like all these things that you're doing. And it's so impressive. It really is.
I think all of us playwrights in the online playwriting groups, and I think we all watch each other for the most part, because I'm familiar with a lot of people who have no idea that, that I'm keeping track of what they do. And I'm sure that, like you said, you watch your fellow playwrights as well. So yeah, I think we all do that. That's not creepy at all, I don't think.
Oh, I appreciate it. So as our listeners know, and as you might know, this is a playwriting podcast, but you do a lot of things, and I really want to talk to you about that. What drew you to this life, and can you tell me about your artistic journey and how you knew that being this artist in all these different formats is what you wanted to do?
Well, for me, theater life for me started. I started out as an actor. I remember being in middle school. I had an older brother who he got engaged into the theater program in high school, and that was the first time, going to see him perform in plays. That was the first time that I was woken up to the fact that theater could be accessible to someone like me, to do that cool stuff that I saw him doing on stage, playing characters. There's that old saying, you follow in your brother's footsteps, and that's kind of what I thought. That was so cool to go out and see him do that. And so when I got to high school, that's how my theater life started. And I continued to act throughout high school, throughout college. Almost 30 years later, I still, I do several plays every year. Along the way, I thought it might be fun to try playwriting myself. And that came about when I was in college. They were doing a short play festival, and it wasn't a big submission call. This is about 20 years ago, so it wasn't that kind of thing. But they were just any student that wanted to direct a short 10, 15-minute play. You can either go find one that's already published, or they said, take a whack at writing one, and that's what I did. And a lot of the audience was friends and family, so they all loved it. But years later, I can look back on it and be like, man, that play was terrible. My first playwriting experience, and, compared to where I am today, I mean, I can look back on that and see that was not what, a great, play to write. But, it was my first one. We all start somewhere. And then I guess it was about my third play, another short play. I was just, submitting out to theaters, people that didn't know me. And the first time I felt validated as a playwright was when, this other theater in some other town, people involved that had no idea who I was. It wasn't friends or family just wanting to put on something that I wrote because I am who I am and they knew me. It was just people that didn't know me. And so for me, that kind of told me that the story, what I wrote, spoke for itself. And so some credibility formed there. And I was like, wow, maybe I'm doing something right. Maybe I should write some more. And I kept writing and kept getting a bunch of acceptances, which, the rejections far outweigh their acceptances, as we all know, as playwrights that submit our stuff out there. So that's what I've been doing for many years now is writing short plays. Every now and then I try to write a full length play, but I think I'm strongest in the short play format. But I'm trying to change that. I really want to focus on more full length works. And then when I was in college, theater was still just a hobby that I did. And in college, my degree is actually in TV cinema and filmmaking. So I have a filmmaking background from that. And then along the way, creating short films, little short screenplays that I wrote, I kind of learned how to. I got experience with editing dialogue and making it sound good and sound effects and just making everything sound immersive and just being in the filmmaking world that kind of guided me to being able to edit audio pretty well. So then around 2018, 2019, I thought it would be fun to just kind of record some of my short plays. We have an annual short play festival here in town. And usually when I write a new play, this is where they premiere. And so I got a bunch of my original cast together of plays that I've written over the years. And we started, recording some of those short plays. I had no idea what I was going to do with them. I was thinking maybe I'll start a YouTube channel. I had a little bit of experience with working with some animators that made little cartoon like storybooks for me before. So I was like, maybe I could do something like that. Maybe I could, have some animations for these little short stories. And but they just kind of sat in a vault for a year or two. A vault, as in, a file on my computer that just kind of sat there with these audio recordings that I did. And then when 2020 came along, all the theaters shut down. And I remembered these recordings and I thought, well, if people can't go to theater, maybe I could, maybe I could bring theater to them. And I was like, maybe I'll do YouTube. And then I knew there was a bunch of audio play podcasts out there. And I was like, well, maybe that's the route I should go. But so far I only had about 5 or 6 of my own plays that I had recorded. And so I was like, well, that's a good start. And so during 2020, I launched the Gather by the Ghostlight podcast, which on all the theater's social media at the time, since all the theaters were shut down, I was seeing a bunch of social media images of theaters posting their ghost lights. And that's kind of where, I got the name from. I was like, since I was seeing all this imagery of this ghost light, and I was like, well, this podcast is going to be where people can come and listen to theater, and I can use my filmmaking knowledge to make it sound kind of cinematic. It'll be in stereo. If someone walks across the room, you'll hear the footsteps walk all across the speakers, and I knew I could do stuff like that. And so I was like, the ghost light will kind of be their campfire, and they'll gather around the ghost light and listen to these audio plays. And that's kind of where that started. And then it's from there. I didn't know what was going to happen with it. Like I said, it was just my own little plays at first, and then along the way I figured out that if I wanted to keep it going, I was going to run out of plays because I only had so many short plays. And that's when, just being a playwright for so many years, I have met other playwrights over the years, and I started reaching out to them, other playwrights that were in festivals with me, and I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And at first, they're kind of hesitant because they're like, oh, I don't know if I want my stuff out there. But then they would go listen and be like, wow, you're doing that sounds really good. Like, yeah, go ahead and produce my stuff. And so yeah, and that's kind of where we are today. So yeah, now I do an annual submission call for plays just so I can experience other playwrights that I might not be familiar with. And then I also leave room for discovery because I'm finding new stuff all the time that I really want to produce after I read it. So in those situations, I'll sometimes reach out to those playwrights directly and just, let them know I found their stuff. And they're usually, stoked for me to kind of dive into their material and get an audio play from it. But yeah, that's kind of where I am today. Like I said, I still act a lot. I still playwright. It's been a year or two since I've made a short film, but I still have ideas on the burner that I want to do. And now Gathered by the Ghostlight's taken up most of my time. I've kind of floated from being the playwright to more of a producer nowadays, but I'll never completely stray away from playwriting. That's definitely one of my first loves. So yeah, that's the full journey. I know that was a little long-winded, but
No,
that's the bulk of it. Yeah.
not at all. Well, What inspires your art? What inspires the journey you found yourself on?
I mean, inspiration can come from so many places. The Quill and Curtain podcast, that's inspiring. I love listening to people, other writers talk about their process. Other screenwriting podcasts out there. There's a podcast called Script Notes that I love, which they mainly talk about screenplays, but I do listen to that. That's very motivating. And as far as my writing, I grew up watching the old black and white Twilight Zone episodes. My mom got me into it at an early age. By the time I was watching it, it was already, been off the air for years. But I can remember just sitting and just watching Twilight Zone episodes with my mom at a very, very young age. And watching those, I would come up with kind of my own ideas in my head when I was young. And then when I got older, I had remembered some of these ideas that I had thought of that I thought would make cool episodes. And that's kind of a lot of the first plays that I wrote were they had a bizarre element to them. There was maybe a twist ending. I did a lot of stuff like that. I've also found inspiration from misheard song lyrics. I'm a big fan of Tom Waits, and you know how he sings. He's got kind of that grungy voice, and he's got this song called "Sins of My Father." And there's one in it. The chorus is, "I'll take the sins of my father down to the pond," and he's saying "down to the pond," but when I first heard it, I thought he was saying "down to the pond," like a pawn shop, and I was like, "That's a cool concept. Take your sins down to a pawn shop and see how much you can get for them." And so I started writing this play, and then I realized, I was like, he's not saying that. I was like, oh, well, I still got a cool idea for a play. So yeah, I wrote that play just from this misheard song lyric at the time. So, I mean, I think there's, like I said, you can find inspiration in anything, as long as your brain's always working and willing to kind of take in and create something out of the environment and atmosphere that you put yourself in. That's kind of how I've been operating over the years.
From either the ghostlight standpoint or your playwriting standpoint, what do you think are your primary challenges right now when you're approaching your work?
For playwriting, I get a lot of great ideas in my head, but for me, a lot of it is sitting down to finally dive into writing, because starting that writing page one and the first couple of pages is always the toughest part for me. For the most part, I know a lot of people. I've heard you mention the vomit draft before, and that's just not something that I've been. I take a long time writing. Like, I'll think about each scene. I'm a linear writer. I don't skip around scene to scene. One thing I do always do is I always know, which I've heard other playwrights say this as well. They always know the ending, and that's kind of, even though I don't write the ending first, I know where I'm trying to go to. But for, like I said, the playwriting challenge for me is just sitting down and getting started. As far as Gathered by the Ghostlight, producing other people's works is a lot of pressure, because I always have this fear that I'm going to record one that the writer doesn't like he listens to it or she listens to it, and it's just, I don't really like the way that turned out. Can you take it down? And I've never had that happen, but anytime I read a script and anytime I start recording, I always have this fear. I'm just like, oh man, I hope this turns out well. It's a lot of anxiety that I deal with, because having someone else's works in your hands is it's a lot of pressure. When you're doing a stage play, you do the stage play and it's done and over with, and then someone may or may not ever see it again. But with these audio plays, I put them out. They're out in podcast land, and anyone could just go hear them anytime. And so I always, with that in mind, I treat every play that I record like it's my own. I don't ever take shortcuts. If I say that this episode's going to release on the 16th, and I get to that point and I don't think it's ready, I will continue nitpicking it and getting it where I want to, because the perfectionist in me. Because not only is it representative of their work, but it's also representative of my own, and just editing and everything. And that's the main challenge with producing other people's works on the podcast is, I have this fear that it's anxiety, really. And then, there's the voice actors that come in to record. Most of them say I'm a good director, but I know that there are occasions where I know how I want them to say it, but one of the things you don't do as a director is give people a line read. You don't, that's something you picked an actor because you trust their instincts, you trust what they can do. So there's the challenge of coaching them, saying what you want them to say and how to deliver the line without, putting them in the right emotion for it, rather than saying, say it like this, and that's one of the other challenges is to let each actor find the right delivery and the right emotion for when recording these audio plays. But yeah, I'd say those are the biggest challenges, I'd say.
I know none of this happens in a vacuum for you, and I really want to hear about your perspective on collaboration and its role in your work with not only your playwriting and your directing and your film work, but Ghostlight as well.
Collaboration, it feels like there's a couple of levels to that, because ultimately you can't do theater without collaboration. You write the play. As far as the final product goes, if people are going to see it on stage, then there was collaboration involved for people to experience that production. Now, as far as writing, I think one area that personally I could improve upon is being more open to collaborating with other writers. That's one thing I've never done, and it's kind of scary because I don't know. I get ideas for scripts and a story, and to invite someone in to also throw in their ideas for the script and story, I feel hesitant to do that. I'm open to it, but that's just one of those things that that's always I've been hesitant to do, and I think it comes from like I used to play guitar a lot, and I played at a bunch of bands. And when you're in a band, you collaborate. That's just what you do, and because everyone has their own opinion, and there've been in situations where I love every song that we ever put out, but there are some songs that I like less than others because there were ideas that maybe I wasn't fond of, but since we were collaborating, we collectively chose the direction for each song, and that's kind of, and I think just that mentality of going through that, even though that was a great experience, just for writing scripts, I've always been hesitant to collaborate with someone else. But maybe, I don't know. I think I should try it, just to see how that goes. But yeah, collaboration as a whole, especially for Gathered by the Ghostlight, recording audio plays, I mean, I couldn't do it without the voice actors, without everything involved with that. I mean, it takes every step, the editing, the directing, producing. I got my co-host Devin. She helps me out a lot now with choosing scripts and just putting together the best product that we can. So yeah, it's collaboration as a whole. And then there's the collaboration on a personal level, which, like I said, I just kind of need to improve on.
What is the theme you hope most resonates with your work?
I found that lately, a lot of the themes that I go with deal with human connection, unexpected human connection. Like, I like watching stories where you think something's going to go one way, you think someone's going to react a certain way, but then they don't. They kind of surprise you, and that's kind of what I like to do in my scripts. For example, the full-length play that I have is about to premiere, Lobster Man. It's a post-apocalyptic play, and just about in all post-apocalyptic media, it always looks like this dangerous world. Humans come across each other, and the first thing they want to do is they're scared of each other, and they're always carrying around weapons, ready to battle whatever. But I wrote it in a way that it's more about two humans just rediscovering human connection again, and not being scared of the world that they're currently in. And that's kind of, I think, human connection and the behavior and the way people interact. That's kind of the themes that I kind of rely on lately.
Okay, you do so much. Do you find it necessary to define yourself as a certain kind of artist, or are you excited to be all kinds of artists?
It's I ultimately, I think, when I'm encountered with a situation where I have to describe myself and they want a definitive answer to cover all the areas, I just say I'm a creative, and that's the best answer I can give for that. But also, depending on what environment I'm in, if I'm doing something in the filmmaking world, then I'll say I'm a filmmaker, or I wrote the screenplay or whatever. And if I'm submitting something for a playwright, I'll call myself a playwright. It really depends on the avenue that I'm going down. But if it just to cover all areas, I would just say creative. That's what I do. I'm a creative. I create things.
All right. We're two white guys. Same age-ish. We're cis white guys. But I've been asking a question to people, and I've been fascinated with the answers. And I'm really interested in your answer.
Mm-hmm.
What does inclusion mean to you?
Inclusion, well, with every new story that gets written, there's new ideas presented, there's new perspectives. I think representation in stories from characters of all lifestyles, all backgrounds, I think that should be welcomed for the most part. And I'm a fan of inclusion. Now, for me in particular, a lot of the scripts that I write, I don't ever specify ethnicity. In most of my scripts where gender doesn't matter, I specifically say male or female, any gender, welcome. But then there's also inclusion as far as your tech people, the people that get involved in your theater community, and I think that's a big part too, is getting not only ideas and stories, but creative ideas who are helping you produce the work. And I think, whether it be training, whether it be, acting classes for your community, because, I've heard the stories where so-and-so theater wouldn't do a certain play because they couldn't cast it. And I think that maybe if they cast the net a little bit wider, offered, if they can't find the right person they need that has the acting experience, maybe offer, extra little acting workshops or something like that, just to get people involved that they need. But also behind the scenes stuff, like I mentioned, just get. I'm a big fan of just a diverse cast, diverse stories, diverse technical field. But again, it does have to do with location and your community and what you have available to you. So I totally understand that, because we deal with that here in Augusta, Georgia. The local theater that I do a lot with, Le Chat Noir, they're currently doing the play Jesus Hopped the A Train by Stephen Natalie Georges, and that's all minority actors. So the owner, he had a time, finding the right cast for that. And, but he did, and they're in rehearsals now. And, he put out an open casting call. He set the expectations. He set what he needed. And he's, they're rehearsing. They're going to get it done. So, I think that's a good example of, casting that net and just making sure that you are finding what you need to get productions made for those kind of parts.
What do you see as the role of the creative as it's evolving in the digital age?
Well, what do you mean by the role? Like,
Well, you do look at what Ghostlight is.
mm-hmm.
I'm a playwright. I send something to you, let's just say you accept it, you put it on, you get the actors, you direct it, you edit it, you put it out there for distribution. Tell me in your mind, what the process is as everything just keeps changing and evolving and we can do more and more things. Where do you think that's going?
For me, it's been constantly evolving. Like I would have never, when I first got into theater, I would have never thought that producing audio plays was even an option. And there's new avenues that open up constantly, which people, you find that in your life. Like I found this, it feels like by accident. But yeah, theater, I think the core of theater, that'll always be a stage production. I don't see that ever changing. It's been around for way too long. It could evolve. There's, people are incorporating projections and green screens and stuff like that. And then there's also the digital world. There's the, audio plays. There's, Zoom readings. There's all that stuff. The role, I guess, would be for me in particular, I'm always trying to find new ways to make things, more exciting. Anytime I read a script, I'm always trying to think of, first I like to know the story's good. And I think all the plays I produced so far have been great stories. And then I look at, okay, so what can I do with effects? Do any of these lines need to be revised to make it fit the audio? Because a lot of times when you're adapting for audio, you got to call out props. You can't just say, here, take this. The audience is going to know what that character just handed him. You got to, and a lot of it sometimes sounds like exposition when you're adapting from a stage play to audio play. But when you listen to it, it doesn't sound that way. And I think, and I've had this conversation with so many playwrights I've worked with, where we're just kind of going back and forth. Because I don't make any changes to scripts when I adapt to audio plays. I always let the playwrights know that a line might not work, and so we figure out a way to make it work for audio. And it's as simple as, like I said, calling out a prop, addressing a certain character, or even just basically saying what you're doing, what the character's doing as they do it. Sometimes you got to do that. And like I said, it feels like exposition, but it works for audio. So yeah, I think as far as what producing the audio plays, there are ways to enhance, and that's kind of what I try to find with everyone I produce. And that's kind of what I consider my role for that, is to find the perfectionist in me tries to find the best overall production quality for everything that we put out there.
What excites you about the future?
A little bit of everything. There's a lot of new works out there. More people are discovering the new play exchange. I still see a lot of theaters sticking with the classics, sticking with what's safe, but I also see a lot of theaters, engaging in the new works, putting out submission calls, and even if they don't fill their whole season with new stuff, there's usually at least one slot in their season where they make it, this is May is going to be new play month, So yeah, I think that's exciting. New play exchange has kind of changed the playing field for a lot of us playwrights, getting more people discovered, and because there's a lot of organizations and theaters that get on there. University students. I've had many university students find my plays, and I see other playwrights all the time commenting on how they're getting productions from university students, and they're the future. So being excited about the future are these young people being educated, learning. They're the ones that are going to be running the theaters in the future, and I think that experience of finding new works and exploring, and not just doing Music Man over and over again, or Christmas Carol, or all the classics and stuff. And there's a place for them. I'm not saying get rid of them. There's a place for all theater, but I think there's also room to grow as far as the new works go. And I see that happening a lot, and I think that's kind of what's going to happen in the future.
All right, I ask everybody the question. Do you know what it is? I'll just ask you. What's your favorite rejection story?
Um, my rejections have kind of run into a blur as far as what I put out and what gets rejected, what gets accepted. But what I can give you is I can give you a rejection I had to give to someone else before. Um, and this kind of scarred me a little bit because we did our As Gathered by the Ghostlight, we did our first stage play production. It was a short play festival, which we did back in April. And we got 800 submissions. And we narrowed our four readers, we narrowed them down to 150 that we thought we progressed to the semifinalist round. And then from there, we narrowed it down to the top 9 plays. It was supposed to be top 8, but once we got to 9, we just could not get rid of one. We were like, these are all good. We want to produce them all. So when I sent out the rejection notices for the people that didn't make it into the fest, the 150 that made it a semifinalist, they got a different email than the people that didn't make it to semifinalists. So the people that didn't make it, it was just, sorry, we didn't pick you, unfortunately. Please try again next year. For the semifinalist, I pretty much said, you made it to the semifinalist round. So we enjoyed your work, but unfortunately it didn't make it to the finalist round. And one of the first emails I got back was someone who said, he said something along, I don't remember it exactly, but he said something along the lines of, well, thanks for congratulating me for nothing. Do better next time. It was something along those lines.
My
And I was just like,
people are crazy. I don't understand.
And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I had to think, I was like, what is he? And he was one of the ones that made it a semifinalist. And he hinted that, congratulating me for being a semifinalist, but then telling me that I get nothing out of it was, I need to do better. I remember that clearly, do better next time. And that for about 48 hours, I was just like, oh my God, that hurt. Because I'm a playwright. These are my peers. And this is the first time I've done something like this. And I was like, is this how this is going to be? And he, like I said, he was one of the first ones that wrote back. But then all the other ones that came in of people, oh, thanks for letting me know this and that. There were so many other ones that were just more understanding and knowing the process. But yeah, that kind of, like I said, that hurt me. But I got over it. But
you handled it well. You handled it well. Jonathan, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you so much for asking me.
Absolutely. And everybody, if you have not listened to Gather by the Ghostlight, you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay, Jonathan, we'll talk soon, man.
All right. Thank you, sir.